Then we're going.
All right.
That's delayed.
Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Board. It's January 2nd, and we'd like to get an early start of the year. We're just eager to do a lot of planning in the next year. And we're going to introduce ourselves for those who may not know who we are. I'm Alex Whiteside, the chairman.
Brian Furs, member.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Laura Mazur, Assistant Town Planner.
William Clark, Planning Director.
And we may be joined by April Lamoureux, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, we're going to meet again a week from Thursday, the 11th. And then we're going to meet again on the 25th. And we're going to do the minutes a week from this Thursday. And we're going to see if there are any citizens in the room who want to address the board. We see a number of people who look like citizens. So anyone want to address the board? No. All right. So now we're going to go into a discussion of 333 Brush Hill Road. Bill, why don't you sort of describe the lay of the land, so to speak?
Okay. Special permit allowed 3 additional houses to be built on that property. One of the requirements for building those 3 homes was site plan approval. The planning board issued a site plan approval to Glen Shane Horizon, which is a company that's building 3 single-family homes. The property has been, they put down the foundations, they built the houses, they put in the...
Cut down the trees first.
They cut down the trees, they put in a temporary road. They were supposed to put in drainage and have all of that ready before the houses went up, but the houses went up before the road was in and finished. The drainage is suspect to not work. The engineering issues out there dealing with stormwater on-site and off-site have been suspect. They've been brought by different neighbors. They've been brought by the condo association. And because of it, this board requested a peer review of what's happening on-site. The developer was given an enforcement order. The enforcement order is to pay for independent engineering review of the project itself. You have before you a copy of the peer review engineer's documentation. The developer's engineer is here. The peer review engineer is here. Nobody else from that property is here.
Well, let's. This matter is in hearing, but this is a discussion of the report. This is not a part of the hearing. It's a discussion of the report, and why don't we run through it?
We can. As both engineers come to the table, I do have a question. No, I have a letter that was sent here that I think I have some issues with. Fred Geisel sent a letter in response to the draft report that was dated December 14th. Because he didn't believe that BSC, that's our engineer, has received and reviewed the latest plans, the drainage calculation, and the correspondence for the project. BSC references plans from April 15th, 2015, which was the original plan. The plans were revised on 5/4/2015, 5/28/2015, 7/21, and 7/31/2015. We understand that the approved plans was dated 7/31/15. The plans were further revised on 10/6/2015 regarding revisions to the sewer force main tie-in, but this had no impact on the stormwater. Revisions to the housing sightings were done in 2016, submitted to the planning department. The drainage calculations, the final revised stormwater management report was dated 8/4/2015. The calculations that BSC refers to are from an earlier report. Peer review, Eggleston Environmental provided further review letter on September 4th, 2014. We responded to that on September 8th, 2015.
Typo when that, it should say 2015, not 2014, obviously.
On hers.
Her report, yes.
Okay, now, did BSC get the right plans? to review?
BSC got the right reports, got the right plans. The plans were actually delivered from CEC to BSC.
That's my typographical error. I omitted, for some reason, the revision date on the data plan.
Okay, but in any event, we're talking about the same plans.
Singing from the same music, yes.
Okay. And it's a little hard to follow you. You sort of described 3 catchment areas in your report. Could you run through it quickly? What?
Introduce yourselves.
Oh, would you introduce yourselves?
Thank you very much.
And, well, thank you very much for welcome to the Planning Board. And you are BSC.
Yes, Dave Crispin with the BSC Group, civil engineer and land surveyor.
And you are CEC.
Frederick Geisel, yes, professional civil engineer representing CEC.
And, okay, so the plans, the original, you did the original plans, and you reviewed them, and you have some questions. Or you have some comments.
Mostly comments. At this point. When we first were engaged by you folks, there were 3 primary questions, and you started off with they cleared the trees. We actually went out, surveyed the improved areas, overlaid that over the original design drawings, counted trees that were shown that are now gone, and estimated an area beyond the hay bale lines that were shown on the approved plans that are now cleared. For lack of a better number, we took a number of 1 tree for every 900 square feet of that area and came up with another 20 trees or so. So we have a number of what we believe significant trees were gone. I found out today there is a landscape planting plan that I had not seen until this afternoon, and I honestly haven't studied that in detail of how it compares back and forth, but it looks like a pretty intensive planting plan. The storm drainage, quite bluntly, the question was asked was it design appropriate for the site? We took some issues with the design calculations because the way we typically approach it is we look at the entire watershed from the highest point where water flows down until it leaves the property line at the bottom. And you don't have a point source at that bottom line because it's a wide line, but you kind of imagine calculations to it, but it kind of imagines a total number, even though it might be in 10 different places. I had trouble making the design calculations compare that pre-existing number to a proposed number. So I ran a whole new set, and I looked at the topography from your town GIS, from topography that came with the design plans, from walking the site, and came up with a watershed that was quite a bit larger than the one that was studied before. The storm drainage system itself is actually quite significant, and it, from a hydrologic modeling point of view, performs very well in the lower return period storms. When you get up to the 100-year storm, you start seeing an increase in flow. I have some ideas of why that is. We'll get into that a little later, but from an appropriateness of the design, one thing that jumped out at me was they did about 8 or 9 test pits on the site. Only one of them is in the storm drainage recharge area. A little more troubling than that is off to the, I think it's the northeast corner. It's looking down the hill. It's that back right-hand corner. I've observed standing water standing there on a fairly steep gradient, which either tells me that for some reason water's trapped there or there's groundwater coming up. There's no test pits near there, so we really don't know how the system functions during different times of the year. So part of the recommendation would be to do a little more study and see how that system really, what's the soils really like there.
Could you point that out on that map for us? Location.
It's going to be a little bit difficult to see, but this is the top of the hill coming all the way down. The storm drainage system is in this corner here, and the puddle is literally in that northeast corner.
Of that system.
Of that system. Interestingly, there's a Google Earth photo as well during construction.
It's where the earth piles were. It's where the loam piles were kept.
I guess if that's where they were, I didn't see where that was, but there's a strong discoloration in the aerial photo from Google Earth that sure looks like a wet spot to me, so I'm wondering how longevity this wet spot really is. I think it may be persistent because downstream of that recharge system, they've excavated a ditch. Usually you don't excavate a ditch unless it's meant to convey water somewhere. So it's not recharging, I think, everything.
This is the reach, or you've got that big stone pit, and this is on top of that.
It's off to the side a little bit from there.
But it's wet, and
Very
it
close
doesn't
proximity.
drain into the stone, it drains off to the side.
It's draining off to the side, right. But what I don't know is it water breaking out of the system? Is it groundwater that naturally occurred? We just don't understand the geology of the area because the nearest test pit's 120 feet over the other side. The other more significant question, or just as significant question, we were unable to see the piping network because it's all buried and underground. There isn't an overflow structure on this recharge system, and it looks like it was intended to be what I would call a level spreader. It's a perforated pipe packed in crushed stone.
Yes, that's what it was supposed to be.
The unusual thing is it's got an opening at the end of it. So it's not being allowed to fill up and overflow. It's squirting out the end coming down. That might be an easy fix to replicate that. But I think it needs a little homework. These systems are supposed to have, by the approved plan, an inspection port, which is a tiny little manhole that goes into the chambers, so you could actually see them. They were supposed to be on the rooftop recharge systems and on the big systems. I was unable to find any of them, which means either they haven't been installed or they're buried over. That would give you some feeling on what's really going on there. Is the water sitting in there for 4 days? Is it gone after a day? You know, what's happening? And I think, again, that's a fairly easy fix for someone with the right equipment. As a surveyor, we're not bring it back on the site and scratch around. One thing that did concern me a little bit, and it was a timing issue, May 16th Google Earth photo very clearly shows the crushed stone system. This is on page 2, if you've got my letter there. at the bottom, the May 16, 2016, you can see the foundations and you can see the recharge system on the right side of that. It's a gray crushed stone square there. April 2017, the houses have roofs on them, on page 3, and the recharge system is still exposed. To me, that's kind of a concern to have a system that's required to be cleaned and not sedimented up to be exposed to the atmosphere for at least a year. I think that needs to be looked at to see if it's sedimented up. What is the condition of that thing? Is it going to do what it's supposed to do? The soils in the area are not that spectacular. It's not sand and gravel. It's a silty material by the look of it. So that's kind of a concern, just as a result of what research we've seen there.
With the port, if there were a port, would you be able to see what the story was?
You should be able to observe the floor of the chambers, yes. I'm presuming they were on a bed of crushed stone. That would be the normal design practice, but you just can't see.
They were called for, inspection reports were called for every row of infiltrators and the individual ones.
The
That
ports
does show, right.
should be there.
Pardon me? The port, they open, it should be there. They should be, they were called for. Excuse me, I don't know what they installed.
I couldn't find them. It makes it really hard to inspect them.
Right. Oftentimes, when you might be doing those, you might have a port. I just did a project in Canton where we, put pipes up above the ground, and then once we were done with our final grading, then they were cut off at cap, so they were at ground level. So it had easy access. But that's the way it should be done. But
if you want to just take a peek at that page 13 on that, you can see the puddle that was there. And this was not after a heavy rainstorm when I was visiting the site. Page 13 again. The Google Earth picture of May of 2016. It sure looks like a puddle to the right of that. I just don't know. Is it pouring out of the end of the system? How did they pipe that connection? I don't know.
one thing I thought it could have been is possibly that when they install things, they've got basically manifold that feeds the system, that something maybe have broken, and therefore there was, when they were getting water in the system, it leaks out. I don't know. We haven't investigated that since this report came out. I was unaware of that. I have not been on site except back in the beginning.
When you designed it.
I designed it, yes, yeah.
Well, you didn't
There shouldn't be a,
supervise- you didn't
there should not be a puddle there, but
So I have a question, Alex, if I may. Would you say, I'm an architect, so normally in our course of work, it's required that the architect do regular site visits during construction to assure that the buildings are being built according to our plan. So would that normally be the case for this type of work?
I'm sure my brother will tell you it depends on what your contract says with your client.
But there's no engineering or code standard for it?
we had no, right on, no requirement, we had no contract to do it except to do as-built. We did have requests to move the buildings, 2 of the 3 buildings, to make a site arrangement. They gave us a sketch of where they wanted to relocate the building to, and they created a plan with a new foundation location and grading around that requested location, and gave them back to the developer, which we understood he was going to, bring to the building department and to the planning board, for their, review concurrence. We had to make sure that they met setbacks. There were no, because these are the condominium association, there's no lot line setbacks between the buildings, but there are to the abutting properties. And so make sure that everything we had proposed there, be it the house, the drainage system, everything was properly located within that, and that's what we gave it.
So when,
That was done 2016.
May I ask another follow-up question?
You can ask as many questions as you'd like.
When you did those revised plans, did you alter the limit of work, the line, that line?
We moved the limit of work, basically.
And did you point that out to anyone?
They were shown on the plans, and we actually have copies of that.
But like, did those things get bubbled, like to say that that's changed? Like, how would one know that that's changed unless they went and tried to do a detailed
What we've
comparison?
done is we've shown setbacks to property lines and, to different locations.
This is just a particularly critical thing that's come up in the last year or two, is this, how much clearing was done and how close to the abutting properties. And I was just curious whether that had been flagged for us to
I think the
be aware
clearing
of.
was done before we were requested to relocate the house foundations. So that was already done. When we were on site and saw what clearing was done, we were frankly quite surprised.
Was there, I'm sorry, Cheryl, to interrupt.
No, go ahead. I have another question, but go ahead.
Did you move the house on the drawing before the house foundation was set?
Yes.
Okay, so I couldn't remember. They didn't come back to move the foundation because the house was built on the wrong spot.
They came to request to relocate, whether it was the buyer or the developer said, well, this will site better, if we move it over here. One house was just, I think, 10 feet, another house was almost 50 feet.
And the locations actually show up on page 18.
So Bill, did you receive those plans?
You have them in that package you have right there. You're looking at page
But at the time, did you receive them? At the time they made the change?
3 and the one in the back.
Those are the back, yeah.
They went to Mr. Prondak.
And did he, they never came back to you though, Bill?
Well, they came to me, but by that point, it was him working the permit, not me.
But
He
did,
said he didn't think they were, he felt that they were, that it was within reason. I'm missing his exact wording, but
and did these locations of these,
that was the location of the house. That's not necessarily having anything to do with the limit of clearing. That's a separate issue.
all right, so maybe something for us to contemplate in the future is if there's going to be any change which impacts the limit of clearing, that we need to see it.
Well, I mean, any change should come to us.
Yeah.
On a special permit, any change that, even non-substantial ones have to come to us.
I mean, a 50-foot change in location, I think, is substantial.
I mean,
And-
it should come to us.
Mr. Chair, if I might. At the time we were doing the final revisions and for approval, some of at one of the hearings toward the end of July of 2015, some of the neighbors commented that can we reduce the grading between the buildings so we can leave trees there? And we said, yes, we can do that. Revise the plans to eliminate changes in grading between the houses, so the trees and everything. If you change the grades and chop down 3 feet, obviously you got to take that tree down. Or if you fill it up 3 feet, you got to take the tree down. But if you leave the grade the same, you don't have to touch that.
But they
That
did.
was our intention. They didn't.
Well, they cut the trees down.
It wasn't done. It wasn't followed. Even though we made our intentions clear and put down the plans.
So one of the other things that struck me in the report was, I think you flagged on this page 18, a substantial amount of fill and therefore a steep slope. Is that right? Or
Very steep slopes.
so was that on the approved plans, that change in the grading? Because I know this was one of the things that we discussed at the time of the special permit, because we were concerned about impact on downgrade neighbors, and we've had a lot of neighbors come in with problems since this has been built. So was that on your plans? That was not? Okay.
It wasn't on the plan.
The steep grades, yeah. So they did that not according to the plans. So what was flagged in your report on page 18 was not according to the plans. Yeah.
So,
The intention was to leave that area natural or in its current condition or pre-existing condition.
It's then current condition.
Right, then current condition.
Then current condition, yeah, okay.
Can I ask another question to Bill or to you? There was a question, Bill, you mentioned something in the special permit, I think, when you were starting your introduction, that the houses were not to be built until the road was done.
That was in the site plan approval, that the
The road had to
drainage,
go in.
the drainage was supposed to work before the houses went in.
So, I mean, looking at these aerials, starting in May of 16, you've got...
Still doesn't.
I understand, but starting in May of 16, you've got 3 foundations in the ground, and there's not any even indication of a road. And then in April of 17, then we know where we are in April of 17. I mean, how...
Right.
So we know that it wasn't done right.
Can I ask a question that, Fred, you said that there were plans that showed where those cleanouts were?
Yeah.
On the detailed page, they're not in here in the detail.
They are shown
On the layout plan.
on the layout plan, they're shown, not on the details.
It's not a detail.
Specifically call out the
Which, is it in the set, Bill, that you gave us?
Yeah, topographic plan, which is number 3.
Yep.
Shows that, and of course, it's hard to see here, but it's inspection port typical, meaning wherever you see that symbol, that's an inspection port, and they're across the entire row.
Okay.
So it's a little hard to see on this reduced size plan, but that's plan number 3.
You said
Right across there, yeah.
there's a- there.
And they're on every one of the
And they're
rooftops.
showing them on the individual ones also,
Okay.
so.
I do know that, having been to the site several times, that
Thank you.
I know that that perforated pipe is supposed to be a couple of feet away from the stone system. It's supposed to be, if the stone system were to fail, that perforated pipe picks up
Right, the overflow,
what
right.
may have taken and broken up.
It's then supposed to be,
As I say, a level spreader, it's a level,
Right.
basically level pipe.
but it shouldn't have an open end.
No.
The idea, if I understand it, I'm going to interpret your design, but if that system, the subsurface system fills up, it bubbles out of that over level spreader.
And then out to the-
Doesn't go into it, it comes out of it.
It would come out of it on the ground because it sloped away, and it would basically spread the water over the entire length instead of having a single pipe as a discharge. You don't want to have that. You don't want to collect everything.
But by leaving it open,
Pardon me?
I have a point source.
Yes, right. That was never the intention. And that's,
Have you seen the
Easy
picture of
fix.
that pipe?
Pardon me?
Have you seen the picture of the pipe?
Yes, I have, yes.
Shocking.
Actually, the pipe is level.
The pipe is level,
Yeah,
yes.
my eye said, yeah, this is going uphill. It's not level.
It's pretty level, yeah. The land changes a little bit, so it may of illusion, but we,
All right, well, we're on page 18. You know, David, I think we interrupted you a few minutes
Well-
ago.
Yeah, sorry. May I ask one more about the industry standard? Given what you said about only one test pit being in the vicinity of this system, would it be customary during the installation to do a few more analyses before you install this type of system?
I think it would be wise.
and we had actually said that, yes, we agreed with that. That was from Eggleston Environmental, and they suggested, and we agreed, and said they would do that when they started construction if we had to modify something. But again,
Again, it
we
wasn't
were
done.
not contracted.
But they didn't do it,
We were not
as far as you know.
No, I don't think so.
But they agreed to do it.
We agreed that.
You
should be
agreed
done.
to
Yeah,
do
we
it,
agreed.
and then it just didn't get done. I mean,
Okay.
this is useful to know.
Right, right. So that was one of the points that you made, David, right? Okay, I'm sorry, so,
All right, now,
no.
David, we're back on page 18.
I think we were jumping around.
The last couple of things, in the very beginning, I talked about there was no point source discharge at that end of the site in the beginning. There's obviously one at the end of the recharge system. There's now a ditch that goes, one of those photographs, there's a ditch that drains around, and there's another one behind the building on the far west side that's excavated. So there's several points that have concentrated flow. And as you get down to the fence, you can actually see where sediment has been moving down or under that fence. So it's been carrying water.
So the fence at the abutting properties.
Abutting property, I don't see a name on this abutting.
Bill, would that be one of the neighbors who's been consistently in?
I'm sorry, I was doing something else.
That's where you're referring to.
Yes, there's
It is?
a new swale there. and there's
But
one-
the
there's one
ditches
coming
aren't on the
around here.
plan.
No.
And are they on the survey now?
Yes.
Okay. So the water has been basically collected right next to the fence of the people who've been coming in with problems?
Truman Parkway area.
Okay.
That's
Is that
Julie's house.
Julie's house?
One other,
Okay.
You're going to have to explain the significance of this.
Here, why don't I open this and you can look at it.
I will point out to the board, and I'm sure you will agree, the site being narrowed for the last 18 months, perhaps, by estimate, is probably the worst hydrological condition you can have based on.
Agreed.
It's
I
what?
think there are solutions here, but it needs to get loamed and
Bare
seeded
soil,
and
yes.
stabilized.
That's,
Not much different from pavement in a bad condition.
So would you say that these kind of conditions would cause trees to be severely damaged and potentially cause them to fall down in an area that's got all this water that didn't have it before?
On adjacent property, or?
Yeah, if those trees were on this property line, so their roots could go into that area, right?
I would be surprised to see if it would affect trees, and the reason I say that is the drainage area to that corner is quite, well, it's not exactly quite small, because some of it comes down the hill and actually bypasses this little corner a little bit, so.
So is water being like channeled just like this, right, from my reading
It's
this?
supposed to go in the catch basin, and then
But
it will reach out. It's here.
But it's not getting to that catch basin?
This structure in particular, it's missing it completely. These
Okay.
two, at least it's pitched to the catch basin.
Going to the backyard,
And do we have the recharge pit?
yes.
those recharge.
We know that, well, we believe they're there, we couldn't find them, because there's nothing to the surface.
There's no inspection reports,
Right.
David says.
I saw the structures before they covered them and told them that they had to mark them so that when people came up, they would know where they were. That didn't happen. The flow does go into the backyard. It doesn't necessarily go to the boundary line. The boundary line has a stone swale that has been put in. There's several sets of hay bales before anything gets to that.
But this is an area which has a lot more soil and a lot more steepness than it was on the approved plans.
You're
And
not
the soil-
You're not seeing
Back
runoff.
in here, back
Here?
in there is, yeah.
I thought it was all three.
It's not as bad, but
Not as bad here?
there's a couple of 3 feet of fill in the back.
Okay.
The one that would get to her house means it has to go.
This one?
No,
Or
keep
this-
going. That one. No, come this way, halfway. Right there. Right there is a stone trench. There's a
Right.
double trench as you get closer to, you see it goes from narrow, it goes to wider. That wider piece is all stone.
Okay.
On the bottom.
And what's the significance of that?
It has a bunch of hay bales in it and silt fence that catches the silt before it gets off of the site.
But this stuff was not in his plans that we approved.
No.
And neither was that additional fill. That's all I'm trying to understand about what's happening here.
And where we're going is, obviously, we want the drainage to work. And we want to be able to check it to make sure that it's there, because, of course, if it's not there, it's not going to work. And we're going to, and we're sort of interested in what we can do now, if there's anything, I know that the attorney for the condo last time said you should dig a pit somewhere so that the water can drain into it until the system is up and running. And so, I mean, that's what we're wondering what's to be done right now. Once we've got the problems in mind, and I think the problems there are problems, and you mentioned what they are, David, and the next question, of course, is what do we do to solve them?
Can I make a comment before the answer to that question?
Yeah?
Because we've done this once before.
When?
Back in August, we actually spoke with Mr. Briansky. Mr. Briansky came back. He's the lawyer for Mr. McKenna. He said, please be advised that this office represents Brush Hill Mansions LLC, who is developing and construction 3 condominium units at the above captioned address on receipt of the interim order dated August 10th, 2017, issued by the Planning Board. My client has hired the following professionals. He says CEC, landscape architects, MKA Landscape Architects, and certified arborist Richard Hunt. Civil environmental consultants was hired by my client to complete the original surveys and the engineering for the project. The town has also required my client to retain an outside engineer to review the plans prepared by my client's engineer, and the town approved same. Well, then I go into the letter that came from CEC from August 31st. Enclosed are recent photographs of the work of the ongoing above referenced project. The site was visited on August 23rd, at which time photos were taken. Also, and enclosed is an interim report outlining work completed and work remaining to be completed. This office will compile another report to be provided to your department before the September board meeting. There's an interim report that came in on 8/28 that
That's the one they refer to?
this is the one that he referred to. Enclosed and attached is the interim topographical plan showing the rough final topography, house locations, individual house infiltration units, driveway locations, driveway drainage, and the street drainage. The leaching field has been completed with overflow provided for surface discharge greater than the design storm runoff. The rate of overflow is significantly less than the pre-development flow rate for all designed storms. This office will monitor the future construction to bring the site to a completion. The work we understand includes the following, and then it has a list of followings, and it says the next report will be prior to the next planning board in September 2017.
And this is from CEC.
This is from CEC. And this drainage wasn't working.
So they said, CEC said, and then perhaps, I mean, if you said that you were going to see this thing through to the end, what happened?
Well, I was not involved in that at that time. The pictures and reports that did not come from me. Other people involved in terms of doing the survey, flying the site to see what was there for topography, and I was not involved in following that through.
But it says this office will monitor future construction to bring the site to completion.
Who signed that?
There is no signature. It came in the interim report, and it came with another report. Ken Buffard.
So the interim
Sent it.
report wasn't signed.
Do you know Ken?
Ken Buffard is the head of CEC.
So he didn't talk to you, the engineer of record, about it?
Not at that time.
All right, well, in any event, whether or not, apparently it wasn't monitored to completion, so now we've got to do something. And David, you've identified some problems, and the problems having been identified, what do we do about it?
I think the harsh reality right now is the ground's going to be frozen, so you're not going to do too much right away.
Well, no, I mean, you hope it stays frozen for a while.
The idea perhaps of creating a temporary depression somewhere might not be a bad idea.
No,
But you got to be careful with that. If it fails for some reason, now you get a sudden release.
Right. So we've typically done that in a number of locations where during construction, is basically temporary sedimentation base and things like that to control the flow during construction while we're building the major stormwater detention basins. But as David says, the stormwater system should be built. You've built your rough roadways, et cetera, in there, so you get construction, you have to obviously build it.
The drain is, of course, set for the finished surface, so it's 2 inches above the surface of the...
Well, sometimes you can build things up to there, or you build the basins, and the basins are set level, and then when you do your final paving, you kind of...
I mean,
taper
but to
down.
get them to work, I mean, there's no temporary plan in place, and the permanent plan apparently is, I mean, the catch basins are raised above the surface of the road by a couple of inches so they don't collect the water coming down the roadway.
The proper way of doing it is to set the basins with your binder course of pavement, and then when you do your final course, raise them up.
Right.
Can I do one more? On November 20th.
But also describe the significance of what you're reading, because I find it a little hard to follow.
All right. This is the interim report that followed. The last one I read was August. This is November. This is the last one before the growing season, before the winter. Enclosed the photographs taken at the above reference site on November 13th. It shows the roadway pavement looking down the roadway. It shows around the wallway. The site remains well-maintained with the exception of some gravel and stone debris that's been collected in the roadway at the low spot at the catch basin. This debris has been clearly washed down from trench work done above the project site. We suggest the developer clean up and remove this material and clean the catch basins as required to maintain the drainage systems. The trench above needs to be properly patched to prevent any further erosion from rainstorms. The site is well maintained at this stage with the following items remaining to be completed during the final construction. Loam and seed of grass area and planting around the dwellings, seeding of top detention area to establish additional vegetation, installation of trees as agreed upon with the landscape architect and arborist, cleaning of catch basins, manholes, drainage swales in spring of 2018, inspect and clean as required the drainage swales and interior units. The next report will be provided at the beginning of growing season.
And would you say that had been done?
No, because when I go to, I think it's plan,
But that interim report wasn't signed either?
again, it wasn't signed.
It was
When I go
just-
to picture number 2, and it shows the catch basins at the end of the cul-de-sac, they're both this far from the roadway surface. But that's every catch basin in the place has an inch to an inch and a half before water gets into it. So it's not,
Catching.
it's not working. The system isn't working, it's just complete runoff.
And here, you talked to the coastal engineering people?
I have not.
Okay, well, there's a engineer named Sean Riley, and we'll give you a copy of this, and we'll give you both a copy of it. They say the catch basins at the low point of the road have filter fabric preventing debris from entering the basin. Because the fabric is clogged with debris, the stormwater ponded until it overtopped the roadway edge and has resulted in flooding, gullying, and erosion downstream. Did you notice that?
I didn't see that occur, but as I said, bare soil is probably the worst hydrologic condition you can have. It does not surprise me at
So
all.
the hydro seeding was not a huge success.
It was barely sprouting when I was there in November or early December.
And
It
and it's
wasn't-
probably
I
not
don't think it
going
wasn't
very
the
well
whole-
now. Okay. Maybe you could could you, Lauren, make a couple of copies of that, and we'll give it to the engineers. This is the coastal report that the condo association did, coming up with. But we really wanted to know what to do.
So in addition to your recommendations, David, and Fred, given what you know now about how it was built, would you say that something needs to be done to the design to help protect the immediate abutters who are downslope? Something on the property should be done that could help? Or do you think that once it's seeded, that this will work properly?
I think it will get a lot better. One thing we didn't talk about, and you mentioned, was the depression northeast of the tennis court, which has not been constructed yet.
In here, right?
If you want to create a bowl, at least that's a trap for some area.
Right.
It's not the
Right,
entire
that's
watershed, but it's,
Right, no, that's what we designed for that, to, you know,
it would help.
to help, and to basically have a bowl with a controlled discharge, an 8-inch pipe coming out of the catch basin, so it wasn't going to flood out the system, and would hold the water there, and then allow it to slowly enter the rest of the drain system. Right, so it's kind of like an interim, you know, detention area.
And right now, it's a hill, so it's not catching this. Everything's shedding off of there.
Okay, so that,
What else could happen? I mean, part of it's going to be investigative. I think we need to understand what the configuration of what was built there is. Are the overflow pipes at the bottom of these 3.5-foot tall chambers? Or are they really at the top? Do they pitch this way? Or, you know, how
In other words, when you say that there are no ports, the ports are actually important.
so in order to,
There's an outflow manifold as well. That's probably the most important thing. Somebody's got to scratch the surface down to get to those so we can see. I expect they should be up quite a bit. Should be near the top of that, but I've seen guys put them in at the bottom. If they put it at the bottom, the detention basin's doing nothing at
Then
all.
it's just shooting right out
Shoot right
before
out.
it
Yeah,
detains.
so you're not detaining anything.
It's not the way it was designed.
Right.
I'm not throwing stones. I'm just saying that
It's just not to take our responsibility, but we did have a report, we had arborists, you know, we had a landscape architect, and these recommendations were given. But we can't hold a gun to someone's head to force them to do something. You know, I mean, maybe you can, we can.
Well, I mean, you expect when you do a plan that it will be complied with.
Yes.
I mean, I know, your civil engineers are not required to do design and construction affidavits like architects are?
it's not controlled construction, which I think is.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, yeah. So if a town wants to protect itself from having another situation like this, is there something that we should do in our special permits to, other than the construction, well, there's in construction, Bill, we have the stormwater, I forget what they're called, there's an acronym for that.
BMPs?
This-
Swamba?
We have a SWEP, stormwater.
SWPPP.
SWEP.
So who makes sure that that gets followed in the course of a normal project?
There's a SWEP for this project.
Right, but if it's not followed, it's meaningless to us.
Right, exactly. It's, I've been involved in a number of projects where I was the one who was making sure the SWEP was followed and visited the site whenever we had a significant storm and examined the site. And if there were any problems, we addressed them immediately.
And you did that at your client's request, and
Well, we are contracted to them. They were
Yeah.
responsible, and they said, I want this thing to be properly followed and maintained. I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
I don't want the EPA to.
Most towns require you to file a report annually as the developer. So you have to hire a stormwater engineer to come out and inspect your system annually and submit it to the town engineer. And it goes on file that the system's in good working order. During construction, you know, it's you can either order interim reports, which we were getting,
But,
Which were not.
which weren't accurate, apparently.
not accurate.
Right.
Or signed.
or acted upon, and then
Right.
you can also have a third party, but someone's got to pay for the third party, obviously, so that's going to be part of your special permit.
Right. So back to Alex, sorry, I'm not sure it was clear, but would anything as a backup be, until you know this is working, you probably, I think what you're saying is until you get more information, you don't know how well this is really going to work, is that right? Not only the seeding, but also whether, once you get in and see how the soils are there, and when you look into it, right?
Soils and how was it really built?
Okay.
When I see such variations, it's suspect.
Okay, all right, so one of the things that I was curious about as we go forward with a landscape architect looking at some potential where there's so much more clearing than what we had approved, is there something where we might want to build in some rain gardens or something as a backup to help protect where people have had so much trouble and are looking for some kind of remedy or some assurance that they're not going to continue to have the trouble? It's, you know, it's one thing for us to say it's winter and nothing's going to happen now, but as soon as things start to melt, it's going to all flow back down to these people. And is there something that we should think about for the winter, and then is there something we should think about for the long term down here? I want to try and be more proactive than having people come back in with
Well,
problems.
no. I mean, we understand the ground is frozen. It doesn't mean we shouldn't
Do something.
We shouldn't determine what can be done.
Okay.
It simply is that because the ground is frozen, you're limited in what you can do. In other words, digging out beyond the tennis court, to get
happen
a
yet,
pit
right.
there may be tough right now. But what we do, we want to know what the next step should be, what prudent next steps should be. Obviously, I think lowering if you look at that picture, lowering the drains so that they catch water.
Even that, if I may comment, that there's a low spot right here.
Even if those are up 2 inches, all it means is it's going to puddle here.
It's not going to
Puddle,
change,
it's
it's
not
not going to
gonna- it's not
change how much gets to this the recharge system dramatically. It means there's going to be a puddle there.
Some of the
why
other
is
ones
there a
on the
puddle
upper
there?
region might make a difference, you know, in terms of, at least you've had one of them down the lower.
One here.
Keep it from.
I'm not even sure they're going to get any water than what falls on them up there, because this is, unless it comes down and over the wall and in there.
Where is this ponding situation that needs to be addressed?
Ponding?
Well, I mean, isn't that what you said, ponding?
Yeah, well, at the low point in the road, if the catch basin structures are 2 inches high, but it's a foot higher all around it,
It's just going to come up that 2 inches and go in those.
There'll be some ponding there,
And
shallow
I
ponding.
think in severe conditions, it's going to come up and go down between here.
So where you said that, I think it was this one is particularly not graded properly in these marginally, so if that's,
These slopes to the structures.
yeah, but isn't it doing this? Isn't all that water funneling like that?
The driveway actually bellies back up again.
Okay, it
on the
does,
far
okay.
side. So that one's.
This isn't a swale here? Is this a swale and that's a
That is a
swale?
cut.
It's a cut.
It's cutting down in.
Those are the driveways coming in, and
And there's retaining wall there or something?
it comes in.
It comes sweep back.
And this whole area here is where that big depression was to be excavated. Hasn't happened.
And that would take care of this situation here.
It would take care of what's coming down here, and so you wouldn't get a lot of the runoff coming even over the road, onto the road from there.
So,
The
so
existing water outside of the development watershed, that's the outside watershed getting hit first.
So we need,
The idea of rain gardens and things like that in the back part of the property like here might be a good, excuse me, localized solution for there. Is there a water fountain around here? I like my water outside.
it's dryness.
so David, you obviously need more information. You've run, you've given us a bill for $9,000, I believe, and we were budgeting 15 for you and the landscape architect, but we're going to go over that, and we're going to have to get some more money. And we can ask the developer to put some more money in, but he may not be willing to do that. And in that event, it seems to me that we're going to have to take some money out of our budget to make sure we get this completed, because we just can't let it go.
So, Bill, we have additional funds in this fiscal year budget? Yeah. Well, I would agree with that.
Okay. It's always good to pay the engineer.
It may be, once we have, come Friday, we may not be able to see anything out there.
For a while.
If we get this blizzard. But, things will improve. I've been there before, and they, except for Snowmageddon a few years ago, then it took a while to improve. But it may be advisable to review some of the things, see what was supposed to be done, and then go out and maybe have a joint visit on site and review things, come out with some ideas, toss out some ideas, to do some troubleshooting. Once we can get to see the ground, to see what's there.
I'm not suggested that I would be the designer on this, but knowing that the watershed starts way up the hill, maybe some of these rain gardens can be further up the hill. Particularly, when you come down the hill, there's a garage before you turn down to that last loop. There's a catch basin right there that dumps into a channel that flows the rest of the way down the hill. That up in that area might be a good place to try and retain some of that flow up the top of the hill, which might help that problem when that ditch was.
Where is it?
Alex, if we're going to spend planning board money, I'd like to ask that we recommend or ask the building inspector to seek reimbursement of that before a certificate of certificate of occupancy is granted.
We do what with them?
I think we should just ask for the money to be given back to us before he gives a certificate of occupancy, whether that requires us to change our site plan or site plan approval or whatever. But we shouldn't have to spend this money on his.
Well, I understand we shouldn't, but if
And I'm just saying, if we do, that's fine. We should require it be given back to us before he gets his
the
occupancy.
building inspector must get their money.
No, we can require as part of site plan review, though, before he gets issued a certificate of occupancy, we get our money paid back to us.
I think that we actually could do that.
The street,
And I think that in an amended site plan approval, we should make that provision. It's
But I
still-
agree, for now, we should find a path to solution.
We need to,
comes down this way.
We should
we
find a
need to
path.
move forward here.
Totally agree.
So is it, and did you factor that water into your design?
Well, we had the ditch coming down through here, and it drains down, and we intended, yeah, we picked up that, I think our design included that water that was coming down there.
So I think this is
Your
useful
watershed
for
was
all of
different
us.
from mine.
Yeah.
This would be useful for, I think, all of us to understand. It's this garage, right? So there's a pipe,
Just to the left of it as you're looking down the hill.
and it basically, there's a catch basin there?
There's a catch basin, there's a paved area.
With an 8-inch pipe coming out.
And that just dumps that water to flow down. And that's what David was suggesting, picking up, which is basically
Collecting it up
off-site,
there.
collecting it higher.
We walked all through here. There's a lot of poison ivy and overgrowth in this whole area when we were on site. So this is an area that could do for a nice upgrade.
Upgrade in that area right there.
But it's not part of the,
But it's part of the watershed that's supposed to be factored into this design, right? Because it was supposed to take care of the whole site, right?
right.
So if it's not adequately picked up by this catch basin, is that what I'm understanding? Is that supposed to be
I think
picked
was
up
the
by that?
intention, something that was there, this catch basin here.
Here's Bill.
If it's not picking up, we need to mediate it
It
uphill.
talks about, if they come to agreement, there was some disagreements about, doing work on someone's property or whatever, it's basically picking it up and tying it into the catch basin there.
So,
Suggested.
okay, so David went,
You're picking the water up from the solid line on that sheet there to the left, the other way, right there. That should be where your pipe is.
Okay.
You don't own, if you move your finger to, if you move to the left, you don't own it.
No, there was no thing on the property, so we said we could.
wait, this is all part of this development.
That piece there is
That
not
piece
that.
here
not
is
that-
not-
This, right.
Exactly.
Right, but if we're talking about, if I'm understanding what you said correctly about the garage, we're looking here, right? And
Tennis court's here. The garage is up.
the garage is
Garage is way up here.
way up there.
It's up here.
So are you suggesting it's not this property that we're concerned with? It's water coming from that pipe down here?
Down along the.
And it's coming down like along here?
Yes.
There's some question in my mind whether it goes to the left of the cul-de-sac or if it falls into the cul-de-sac. Just don't have enough detailed topography.
So- But somehow it's coming through here,
Coming down.
Coming
on the
down through here.
surface.
This area here, and where it was before is this hill, so it could break this way toward the cul-de-sac or stay on the other side, depending on, what might be there in terms of topography.
But the topography looks like it's all going like this.
Topography's coming down this way, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm saying we have a little bridge through here,
I
so
see.
it could break, go on this side or go on this side toward the cul-de-sac.
So we haven't heard that from this abutter that there's problems with the water, or have
That's
we?
all
All
uphill.
Yeah.
right, so you said break this way. It's
Can't
not going to go that way.
Water's got to come, it's got to come towards me
Have a
on that
bridge
page. Yes.
up through here, so sometimes if it's, we don't have a little topo.
We have topo on here.
Yeah, it's
It's all coming like this, according to
It's
this.
2-foot contours, and we're really looking for a 1-foot accuracy up in there to,
All right, well,
There's the cul-de-sac. So pick the two, go like this, pick up 1, 2, 1, 2, go to the other side. Here's that piece here. Water's not going from here to here. It might be coming from here and coming over here, which means coming in by that tree.
Yeah.
Come to me a little bit, right in there, right in there. It may come there behind that wall, and it may be coming in to
top of
this
the wall.
system. It's not coming over the wall, because the wall has too much behind it.
Okay.
There's too much stone behind that wall. The wall may be directing it and pushing it.
Pushing it down this way
They're only
around.
going to push, right, they're going to push it, and it's going to come to the curb right in here.
all right, so I guess the
Well,
question,
What we want is, we want an action plan. What we can do Obviously, we have to check out eventually we want the permanent system to work. We want to know what we can do on an interim basis, if anything, that will be useful, I think, and
I think we need a budget for all that, because
Well, and even,
you may be surprised.
we're not going to pay for, we're going to pay for the engineering, we're not going to pay for the work.
I understand that. You might be surprised by the, I don't think, how big is our budget? It's not that big, is it?
Not that big.
No, I mean, this could be a
I think what you're missing here
$25,000 bill.
is the final grading. And until you get the final grading, you're,
Yeah,
Well,
but there's
I'm
going to be some
still-
supplemental work needed here, Bill, with all the additional
I'm
fill.
still troubled by how what's built is so,
make it
seems to
work,
be so
right.
different from
Yeah,
plans.
that's the interim step. But at some point, you need a long-term design here to deal with all the different changes that happen here.
All right.
There was
So
no
you're
wall around
suggesting
here on the
there has to be
plan.
a final grading plan. The grading on this is going to have to be changed on the plan.
no, I think you already know what the final's going to be. It's just a
Well, then,
matter
if
of
we know what
making
the
it happen.
final's going to be, then why can't we take measures? I mean, we know what it is, we know what it's going to be, we know what the problem is, we know what the final measures will be. The question is, are there interim measures we should take?
Well, so I think there's the interim measures. There's still a question of whether there's anything that needs to be done with the system as built, right? Until we get more information, we won't know that.
That's question number one.
Right.
I would love to see a morning with a backhoe out there to carefully uncover parts of it and see what the configuration of what was installed, unless the contractor has photographs. Maybe, that's an option. If he's got actual photographs of what he built before he covered it, which would be wise.
We've got some photographs.
Well, BSD's going to put together the action plan, I assume.
Right. And the question, I think, about interim is important, too. And then whether there's anything that should be changed about the way it's built, because it's not built the way it was designed.
The whole site.
The site's not. I mean, this system might be, but this wall wasn't on the plan. I don't know how many other things. I'd like to get an opinion from Fred, because he wasn't involved in all these changes, whether he thinks that what's there would require him now to want to rethink anything that he's done. If you're not going to, you're just making comments and not designing, right, David? So, yeah.
Do what you tell me to do, but it's an unusual position to sit next to the designer and tell him how to design it.
But I think, I certainly welcome suggestions, ideas, rain gardens, but sometimes just finding out what's there is critically important. How can we correct this? Can we take this level spreader that's on the outside and plug it up and then see, again, how it works? That's a very interim, small activity that could, we could see that doesn't work
That'd be
properly.
wise.
Yeah, to do that.
I agree with that.
David, if Fred, does the engineering, in other words, we'd say to the developer, pointing out what the report said, that CEC is going to see this thing through to the end, that we expect that CEC, to where you, Fred, see this through to the end, and David, you will continue in as our peer reviewer. Is that...
That would be normal protocol.
That seems to be the way to do it, and Fred, I think that you've convinced us that you could be on top of this situation if you were allowed to be.
I guess so, yeah.
And I think that we're going to suggest to the developer that you be allowed to be.
Right.
So, shall we
I think that makes,
we leave it there?
yeah, makes sense to me.
Just as a comment, you had asked about, how do you keep the design engineer involved after the approval? I'll akin this to septic system work, which I've done a ton of. And there are many communities that require that the design engineer be the inspecting engineer to do the certificate of
Inspected,
occupancy.
it's just certified, do the as-built survey and certify and put his
All it needs to be is
stamp
a
on the
condition
line.
of the approval.
And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that we should definitely add to our permit.
Standard template.
Right, right, that makes sense, thank you.
There are a lot of developers that realize that hiring a competent engineer to keep tabs on things is cheap insurance.
Right,
If you do it right the first time, you don't have to fix it. The fixing it sometimes can be a lot more expensive than doing it right the first time.
oh, yeah. Most
But
of
this is
the
a situation where we're dealing with a developer who's going to build it, sell it,
be done.
disappear into the night. And there's no reason for him to build it right if he doesn't get caught. And
Well, there is a certain reason at this point.
he got caught.
But there's still the part about, the SWPPP says you're going to check the site monthly. You're on the hook for it, you signed it, or your company signed it.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Well, Fred's saying that he will, but the fact is that he hasn't been, for his company, involved, so he needs to go back and talk to, what was the
Right,
president?
but we're going
and whoever.
to talk to the developer.
Developer,
also,
right.
Because we've got to get this, we got to get it done. And that's the important thing. We're going to, does David have a copy of our survey? Because if he
We
doesn't.
did it.
This is their survey.
We did it
This
for
is
you.
BSC.
Oh,
Did the
you,
survey.
Fred.
Yes, we have a copy of this.
Oh,
yes.
okay, right,
A couple copies, actually.
exactly.
And what we're doing a lot of right now is flying it with drones, have a known elevation, and we just did a project on Weymouth.
Couldn't put the surveyors out of business, but we got them to.
No, yeah, it's still not going to put survey, but no, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done, but it's very, very useful for getting a lot of good information and being able to compare it to your proposed plans to what's there now and say, okay, there's a significant discrepancy here. What's the issue? And be able to do that. And cover a lot of ground in a very short period of time. So I think that's one of the things that we would be doing, and to kind of verify, some of the stuff and just say, okay, here's an area, but by going out there and actually walking and saying, okay, here's an area with a problem. Let's find out exactly what we have for topography there and what's happening. And then, so, where you say we have 2-foot contours, we really need 1-foot contours or even close, just make sure which way the water
You
goes.
should address the catchment areas also, because we have this question of whether or not you've got the right catchment area.
One of the hydrologic questions, the roadway up near the garage, it cuts across, has a catch basin right there.
Yeah.
It has an 8-inch line going out. My eye is less than 6 or 8 inches between here and here, so if the 8-inch can't take the flow, it's going to go down here.
Right.
If you're going to go out and do some measurements, that would be a great place to do some measurements.
You're suggesting that pipe should be 16 inches,
Well,
at
That
least.
causes another problem somewhere else. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to model it.
sometimes it's not, I mean,
Now have an issue between the contractor's attorney and the condo attorney. Now, you've got two people who don't like each other, two people who are in court with each other, and Mr. Prondak is sitting in the middle, and he's not happy about being stuck in the middle of this.
Well, we don't need to get in the middle of that, we just need,
Is out front in certain respects.
He is, and he's not,
He doesn't like it, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
but if the catchment area includes this, this pipe, then I think it's part of
Changes
the,
things.
yeah.
Yeah, I made an evaluation based on an eyeball approximation.
Yeah.
And it looks like it will overflow in that 100-year storm and go down the hill. And as I said, the system looks like it should work pretty good for the lower return period storms. gets backed up, it comes down the hill, and I think that's kind of where the problem is.
Well, but that's not how it's supposed to be engineered, so,
Well, that was beyond our reach, and we didn't engineer that, and I don't think it ever was engineered. I think it was just put in.
To me, it's an existing condition, and it's about half an hour with a level to figure out if the model is right or not. Presumption.
So it seems to me we'd like to have that analyzed. Since
well, I
since
think
David
that...
suggested it's very important.
I think that, yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it has to be determined, along with a number of other things that have to be analyzed. But I think the way to do it is to get you back to work, Fred, and get this thing straightened out, so to speak. Get this thing done so that we can start planting the trees in the rain gardens. But I think the rain gardens are a great idea, Cheryl, and so our landscape architect is going to have to be proficient in rain gardens.
Well, but that,
Or is it a rain garden and an engineering issue as much as a landscape architect
well, if it's
issue?
part of the stormwater design system, then it's kind of go together, yeah. The plant materials might come best from the landscape architect, but
Oh, yeah, clearly.
But it seems to me if we think that that's a good idea and they're going to do additional borings, is it worth seeing what the soil is in these conditions, in these locations too? You got to do some investigation over there, right?
You don't want to put it if it's going to be holding water for 3 months out of the year.
Right. You don't want to cause problems, right?
Yeah, we've done some where we had the low area or whatever, and we put infiltration in, but we put an overflow, and then we had basically a wet basin, which was basically it was adjacent to wetlands, so it was a wet basin. Of course, this was running down to someone else's property, but it was an area where we put a wet basin in, and it holds water, and it stays there. It's all planted nicely. And it's a wet, we call it wet water quality swale, but this was actually more of a basin than a swale. And it works very well to basically get things back into the recharging the groundwater and going into the well. So there's a lot of different things you can do.
The reason I suggested is because once water gets past these catch basins, there's nothing to prevent it from going everywhere, right? So.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to move on, Bill. We have the SWPPP says that Fred will be doing monthly inspections, and the report says that Fred will be on top of this for the duration of the project.
It says CEC will, I'm not sure about Fred.
And you're going to tell the developer that that's what he said, that's what he's going to do. And we will,
That I agree.
and thanks
My hands to the fire.
thanks for coming in, guys. And David, thank you very much for your good work.
There was the report. The report you referenced was an earlier report. This has different information in it, and this was the final report when it was approved. And I did have in here, and then the letters I had back and forth between Eggleston Environmental and us.
Okay.
A couple of things. So I have a copy for, if you want a copy of this.
That will be great.
Okay, so here's a copy of it. You say you do have the plan,
This
so.
is for me?
That's for you,
Yep,
yes.
thank you.
So you do have the plan, so that's fine. I brought the final, does not read plans, and,
Does this look like it's, this, Bill, this is the, does this look,
The revision date's in the corner.
right, yes, yeah, that's the
That's fine,
final,
okay.
yes. But again, what was referred to.
But it also has,
My mistake.
Yeah.
it also has in the back 3, one of the requirements of the special permit is that there, or the site plan approval, is that there will be a as-built plan of the foundations, and that's what came in on 11/21.
Okay.
That one.
Okay.
That's the one that,
All right, well, we got that.
Inside?
And it's not much use, but it's better
and
than
Fred
nothing.
signed that.
Bruce.
Bruce Eaton signed that originally. Yeah, he was the.
Is that the one dated 11/16?
11/17/06.
06? No. 06?
No.
11.
No, look at the very top.
17,
Email.
2016, yeah.
Yeah.
21,
I'm sorry,
16.
16. What did I say, 06?
06.
I'm sorry, 16.
Wasn't Bruce dead by then?
Okay.
He was not, yeah, I don't
He was
know.
dead by then.
Yeah, this is his.
That was only the survey, that's not,
It's a survey.
11/21/16,
right.
sorry.
That was his survey. That was his foundation survey. Foundation.
that one might be wrong.
Yeah, I don't.
But
I
the
don't
title
know.
block says 11/17/2016.
Yeah, no, Bruce was not here then.
Well, we can compare it with our survey to see if it's correct. Do you,
Well, no, it's a requirement of the, yes, thank you.
okay.
All right, thank you.
I don't know what your schedule is, but I will be unavailable from the 12th to the 20th.
Are we picking this up again on the 11th?
On the 11th,
Why don't you come in on the 11th, and that would be good. And Fred, why don't you come in on the 11th if you can? And when do we have it on?
$7:30 on January 11th.
Okay, well, it's going to be reasonably early.
not worry about that. This is going to be AWOL.
Okay, this is, that, I think you'd better come in on the 11th, because I'm sure that people who aren't here tonight will obviously encourage them to watch the tape, but they may have some questions.
I'm presuming we can chat?
Oh, yes. We hope that you will chat, and if you want to talk to that third engineer, we gave you his his thing. That will be splendid. Sean
Riley.
That's good. Very good, thanks.
Very good.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thanks so much for coming in. And I think that we've made some progress.
We're making some progress, yes.
Okay, now, let's see if we can discuss our zoning. Shall we start with the zoning map amendment?
Bye-bye.
Last time the town zoning map was updated was 1995.
But this, we're not updating it, we're changing it. This is a different iteration.
Well, when the town zoning map was originally drawn, it was drawn by draftsmen. It was, in the 90s, it was digitized from those hand drawings.
Yeah.
The digitizing shows areas, but when you start to pull it back, it doesn't necessarily line up exactly where it should. The zoning map that we have a draft of right here is done by parcel data and done with our GIS system, Geographic Information System. The parcel-based data is there for every parcel in town. We have information on each one of these parcels. If there is a mistake in the colors within the pods of colors you see now, it may be that there is a,
Well, we don't want there to be a mistake.
no, wait a minute. It may just be that there's a mistake through the assessor's office, and the bill is going out with one thing, but it's on their plan, it may say something that's just an administrative mistake. It's not us, and it's not,
what is
we're
this?
not changing it.
See that diamond
I
right
do.
in here? What is that? I mean, that,
I mean, I have a ton of call-outs in 10 minutes. Which one are you talking about?
And that's okay.
little-
Yeah, that's on Metropolitan, yeah, that's on what the heck's the name of that street? Meadowview. That's obviously not a residential, what is it? A?
Right, there's no, it's not a resident B lot.
Residential A.
It's just one that is
Wrong.
misnamed, but it's not up to me to make those changes. I am not making changes to those.
well, all right.
Changes like that
you
belong
look
to the
at-
assessor.
You look at, we are the people who are doing the map, and if you have questions,
We're changing
bring them to the board, and we will, in other words, this little diamond is, this little
That is.
triangle is
right.
not
I have
going,
this
it's
many
not going to
comments in-
stay there,
in
okay.
5 minutes.
Okay.
So,
So we're going to put this in, but,
We know that the picture here is a draft because there is no such thing as something with no zoning. We know that where it says exempt, it's not exempt. There's no
all right, we're going to discuss it, but we're not going to.
Exempt in this case means state or federal.
We're not going to discuss it tonight. The question is, we'll shoot for May, and if we're not done by then, we'll do it in October.
Thank you.
But we'll put it on, and this simply says that,
you want my changes?
No, I want your changes.
I have a question.
I can figure them out.
Copy of them?
you have a question about the zoning map?
Well, do we track which parcels are covered by special permits?
No, because that has nothing to do with the zoning.
Okay.
That special permit is just over existing, is that right?
It's
We're going to develop, once we do this, we will develop an overlay that will be electronic overlay that is possible to drop down on top of it, but it's not something,
most of
this is the underlying map. The other one's just electronic.
This is the zoning. The special permits are, you can call them an overlay if you want to, but they're not zoning.
We'll create,
What's
All right,
an
but we're
RD1?
going to inspect these things. We're going to get to them. Would you put it on the 25?
5.
Yes.
And we'll discuss it, we'll give it some time. And Bill, you say you won't make changes to the map because it's not of your department, but it is our department, so we will make the changes if you don't want to.
Individual parcels?
No, if this map is not correct, individual parcels are not zoned.
No, but the problem, he's saying we have to make the changes through the assessor's office, is all he's saying.
No, we don't have to.
To make the map look correct, we will, because the map is feeding off of assessment data. That's what he's
Yes.
telling you. So the map
That
is gonna-
triangle that you're pointing to?
That's because of the assessment.
That's an assessor number, it's not mine. That's not something that we have, we cannot make that change. Only the assessor can do
It's
it.
a clerical thing.
There's a
We can-
little-
It's an
we can give the
administrative-
assessor
yeah.
a-
Residential B there, it's,
Right,
this
there's a bunch
is,
of them.
Right.
all right, okay, we're going to.
So we give a list to the
We'll put
assessor.
this on, but we need some work. Okay, now, temporary signs. What's the other one? I don't have the other one.
Ice house and,
The ice house zoning, I don't have a copy of that. Thank you.
what are we working on?
Okay, this is the Attorney General, in approving the ice house zoning, said if you limit all these, your bedrooms to one bedrooms, you're basically discriminating against children, and familial status is a protected category in the Fair Housing Act. So the Attorney General strongly suggested that two bedrooms not be prohibited. So what I've suggested is that we allow 2 bedrooms, provided that we get 2 parking spaces per bedroom, and that the total number of bedrooms in the development not exceed 16. And if you have, there are 12 units, and if you have 16, maybe the wrong, with 1 bedrooms, you would have 12 bedrooms. And if you have 2 bedrooms, that means you get 4 2-bedroom units, as I computed.
Or
You could have
or
4
more if you
two-bedroom
have
units.
studios. Well, how do you count the studio?
As 1 bedroom.
It's a 1 bed?
One of the challenges with this would be, on an affordable component, you'd have to have the 2 bedrooms be affordable. So your biggest, most expensive units are going to have to be the affordable units.
No, you have to scatter them throughout your sizes.
Okay, but you'd have to have at least one of your 2 bedrooms.
You'd have to have a 1 2-bedroom, which should be affordable.
Okay.
That's right.
So it wouldn't have to be
If that's how they do it.
Right.
I mean, they don't have to do 4 2-bedrooms. This isn't a requirement.
Not a
They can
requirement.
do
They
all
can
one.
all do ones. And then,
Just, we're not prohibiting them from doing it, is what you're saying it was the issue.
Right, prohibiting the 2 bedrooms, the Attorney General had said that you may be skating on thin ice, and we strongly recommend that you change this. And this
So that,
prohibits it from being all 2s, but
why did we do that?
what?
Why did we originally prohibit them?
Oh, because of the number of units and the amount of space.
Okay. So, okay.
But I mean,
think your language
the
is
building size, I think the language works okay.
I think the town meeting may raise the question about how does that impact schools, but
this whole question about schools, I would just like to say, if you have a single-family house and you're a family of 2 children, and it costs $14,000 a year to send a child to school, that's $28,000 for a single-family house. And our median single-family house is probably not paying $28,000 a year in taxes.
I understand.
So this notion that single-family homes pay for themselves
I don't think
for
anybody's
schools,
saying that necessarily.
whereas rental apartments don't pay for themselves, I think is
No,
a
the
false
idea-
equivalency.
The idea some people have is that somehow if you do apartments, you won't have any kids. And I think kids are actually sort of a nice touch. And so, and you know, it was the school building authority. I mean, we actually asked for bigger schools, and they said, no, we won't give you the money. You're going to, you know, you'll start reducing your school population in the future. And they called it wrong, and if something has to be done, something has to be done. But we've got fire stations and DPW yards too. But I don't see any particular reason to get too tough on kids.
fine with this.
So I'm fine with this also.
Okay. Now, temporary signs is the same thing that we had, except I've added a couple things. One is that no temporary sign shall be displayed for a continuous period in excess of 90 days. And of course, if you interrupt it, you take it down for a day, then presumably you get another 90 days.
Sorry,
But
where's that?
it's, shall we read through it? Temporary signs are permitted,
Yep.
provided that, this is the second paragraph.
Okay.
As amended, section 3B3 shall read, temporary signs are permitted, provided that a temporary sign advertising any commodities shall be displayed only on premises where such commodities are sold, and that any such temporary advertising sign shall be displayed for no more than 45 days. That was in the original one. The face area is the same, 16 square feet, not more than 5 feet in any direction. I say, any temporary signs regarding a future occurrence or event shall be promptly removed once that occurrence or event has occurred. And I think that's right. No temporary sign shall be displayed for a continuous period in excess of 90 days. Currently, we have no limitation at all, and I don't see that anyone could possibly, I mean, people can object to almost anything, but that's a continuous period of 90 days, is a long time. Notwithstanding the foregoing, banners constituting a temporary sign, that simply means that it fits within the definition of sign.
Wait, Alex, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. The 45 days and the 90 days,
Yeah.
the difference between the two?
Yes, the one is the advertising signs on these,
Okay.
on Tedeschi's.
Right.
Okay, okay.
In other words, we don't want them, Tedeschi's would get it,
Right.
the 90-day non-continuous, but 45 days works for that.
Okay.
And is real estate signs included in this? I can't remember. They are. So for sale, you'd have to pull it down for a day and put it back
Yeah.
up. Okay. Right now, that's not a problem.
Yeah. A continuous period. I mean, you just interrupt it. It's just so people don't think that these are forever. Notwithstanding the foregoing, banners constituting a temporary sign, not to exceed 2 feet by 12 feet, may be displayed for a period of no more than 21 days.
So what's the thinking about all these different times? Sorry.
What?
What's the rationale or the thought behind 3 different
Well, I think
periods?
banners are celebrate Milton, fair. I mean, these are bigger temporary signs than the usual temporary sign, and
So do you think they're having them up 3 weeks before an event is what people have been doing, or do they usually have them like a month up before? Do you know, Bill?
look, 21 days should be enough, I would think.
I think 21 days is enough. I mean, I think we've been trying no more than 30.
I was thinking that there's some that are more than 3 weeks, but okay. I mean, I think we have to have a rationale for it.
30 days,
so.
30 days is fine with me.
I wonder if you should just make 45 and 21 both 30.
That's why I'm just wondering, we're going to have a rationale for all the different lengths. And
The advertising signs for 30 days?
Yeah, why don't you make the banners and the advertising 30 days?
Everything is 30 days.
Well, not everything, but
The 90 days stays.
advertising, well, we can do 30 days. I mean, 30, twice. You've got that, Lauren?
How do you get permission to put one of these up?
What, a banner? You just put it up. It's on your property.
anything that's temporary is that sort of sign, right?
Right. I mean, we're not talking about temporary signs on public property. We're talking about temporary signs on your property. Your property, Bill.
So you can put up a sign that,
The banners are 30 days also? Okay. 30.
I mean, I have to get permits in most municipalities to put up a banner, if for no other reasons than that they can collect my $50.
But that's on public property.
Nope.
no, it's
That's on the
zone.
face of my building.
But that's because it's a business.
Okay,
And
so
that-
this is for
it says that here.
non-business. Okay.
Right.
Okay, now I understand.
Which is why I'm trying to go.
Got it.
I mean, where commodities are sold, rented, or otherwise available to the public to a valid business use. So I'm trying to figure that other temporary advertising sign.
Shall we say non-commercial banners?
Yeah.
I don't think that,
But can I put up,
yes. But non-commercial banners, I think,
So temporary, okay,
Changes
so then,
It's not up there.
Go to the second paragraph.
I'm just looking what we're looking at. So this is in the business district. This is not in the business district. This is in a
These are
non-residential
residential.
signs.
The business zoning says you can have temporary signs the same as,
But all the businesses that are in residential zoning fall under this, or do they fall under?
all the
So
what?
the businesses that are in residential zones.
They have to get a variance for their permanent signs, and this gives them a temporary sign for,
How many can they have?
Yeah, so I have two comments. One was, Bill, should it be limited to one per face of building or face of, of the plane on which the sign is held? The second would be, should we limit the sign to 16 feet or 25 or 30% of the area, whichever is smaller?
I think that we're getting,
We're getting complicated, but my concern is you bring up Tedeschi's. Tedeschi starts putting up
Well, we can-
with signs in the
we can
windows.
say one or two. I mean, they're only 4 by 6.
But those are big signs if you're looking in a Tedeschi's window and they've got their signs 4 by 6, 4 by 6, 4 by 6, 4 by 6.
Well, how about
No
saying that?
limits
more
on the
view.
number.
Are we going to say one temporary sign for,
Well, you can have it be more than one as long as the total area remain the same.
I think that goes to Brian's point.
well, I
the
think
size.
that,
Right, but if you make that the total area, and you say it could be more than one sign, then you're still limiting how much total coverage you're getting, which I think is what you're trying to get at, right? I think that makes sense.
So this is going to mostly apply to retail businesses.
This has to do with political signs and stuff that people do on their lawns.
Yeah, well,
Would the businesses
not
in the
when it's talking
resident-
about, temporary signs are permitted provided the temporary sign advertising commodities, not limited to goods, foods, and services shall be displayed only. So this is where I worry about something like a Tedeschi's, where typically you'd restrict it to 30% of their window area or something, because otherwise they're going to litter the front of their building with bread, 30, whatever, $2.39 milk, $3.99 a gallon, whatever, and it's going to be all over the front of their building.
Lottery tickets.
Yeah, it's going to be all over the front of the building.
Well, how about just saying one temporary sign?
Per business?
Yeah. Well, temporary, provided that one temporary sign. And I think you can, if you take out the word "a" in the first thing and put in one, it can be interpreted that if you have your dentist and your Tedeschi's, you can, each one can have a temporary sign.
Each business.
Yeah. Each, yes.
It says to a valid business, so it's one. You skip through to a valid business, so that, I think, accomplishes that, right? That language does? Seems to me.
What did you say?
I said, it seems to me that by that change that you suggested, changing the word "a" in front of temporary to the word "one,"
one.
accomplishes
I think it-
allowing it to
I
be
think it
for each
accomplishes
business.
that.
Yeah.
And then again, the only other potential change, knowing retailers as I do, and wearing my other hat today, I would consider adding, or you have in excess of 16 square feet for each face. I would suggest saying something like, or no more than 30% of the wall or window on which the sign is held, or displayed.
But of course, doing that with a residential structure makes it too complicated.
Okay, I'm just warning you, you're going to see big signs on any commercial business, especially retail businesses.
They
Big
can
ones.
only have one.
One big sign.
They can, and it can only be up for 30 days.
Okay, but that's a fair point. But then they're going to wait a day and they're going to put a new one
They
up.
can say that, but we will say this is
I'm
This
giving
is
you
a
the
total of 30
unintended
days.
consequences that
look, we can change
people
it.
ask for all the time.
Change it in
So
October.
I'm just letting you know that this is going to come up.
So your reading is one temporary sign
Yeah.
shall have a face area?
No. It just leave the language. No temporary sign shall have a face area in excess of 16 square feet, except for a banner.
Face. Each face, Each
Let's
face.
take the language as it is and let me do a little homework around town
All
about
right,
what this
you
could be.
know,
I think I'm fine with it as it is, but I want to talk about the percentage area.
Well, no, we will discuss these. All right, so we'll entertain a motion
We have one more.
submit these 3 articles to.
We have one more.
What's the?
We are revisiting the
Article number 50 from May. Sorry. To see if the town will vote pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of Mass General Laws to establish a bylaw, a revolving fund for money received from applicants before the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board for approval of development which may impact traffic roads in the town. To authorize the town administrator with the approval of the planning board to expend money from such revolving fund for studying traffic, making traffic improvements, or modifying traffic control infrastructure. To determine a limit on the total amount which may be expended from such funding during the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018. And to act on anything relating thereto.
So this is my bylaw. I want to give the intent, and I want to give an example of at least one other town that has done something like this, and then we can go from there. But the intent, I'm going to use East Milton Square as our example. Everybody knows East Milton Square has a traffic problem. It's well documented on, if nothing else, Milton Neighbors on Facebook, but throughout, I think everybody acknowledges it. One of East Milton's biggest problems is it's fractionally owned. So if there's development that will happen in East Milton Square, it will be held currently in small little chunks all around the square. And all of those little chunks could have death by 1,000 cuts here if each of those developments brings more and more high-intensity uses. Arguably, you'd have more and more traffic without any real ability to get any substantial mitigation from any single owner because their projects simply wouldn't warrant it on their own. This would allow the planning board to require, in lieu of traffic mitigation, some sort of contribution to a traffic fund, which would allow for initially traffic studies and ultimately potentially implementation of some traffic calming or other traffic measures to remedy the situation. The example I'll give you is slightly different than that, but in Newton, they have Needham Street, which has been under study since 1980-something to renovate the roadway. The state has money funded to go ahead and fix the roadway. Newton has required in every special permit, I think since the early 90s, that developers on that street have in their special permits a requirement to contribute to a fund, to contribute to the undergrounding of wires if and when Needham Street is done. And so this would allow the community to go back to developers and essentially pull money from them if and when they ever get this undergrounding. Framingham is another community that has a traffic fund that is basically for small projects. Each small project contributes a certain amount of money to their traffic fund from which the town can use this money to implement larger traffic measures around the community to solve for traffic problems created by commercial development. This was my attempt at creating an account into which our board or the zoning board could implement a mitigation measure through some sort of traffic fund or traffic requirement, traffic contribution on different projects that they pay into a fund from which the town administrator could fund studies and again eventually implement traffic calming or traffic mitigation measures. That's the idea behind it. I haven't gone too much further because we haven't had a vote to move this forward. Lauren has done some study with MAPIC to look at whether, what other towns and what other communities have done this and what mechanisms they've used. I think it's something that we should absolutely implement in some form or another. We have substantial large projects coming to us over the next, large and small projects coming to us over the next 24 months likely with anything from Carberry to Milton Ice House. So I'd like to see something done. I'm not sure how this community fixes some of its traffic problems without some financial contributions from development and partnerships with developers, and I see this as a way to getting to that. So we tried it in May. There were some good questions asked. The language has not been adjusted to deal with those questions, so this would have to be a placeholder, but it would be something that I'd love to see this board work towards.
Well, Lauren hasn't found any other community in the state that has a revolving fund for this purpose. And so we have no model. We're going to have to get an opinion of town council. I think that it's probably an exaction because the Carberry's paying for traffic in East Milton has absolutely nothing to do with the Carberry's, and if we sock them good, which I expect you would want to do, and we're going to have to discuss how much they would have to pay, because we can't just establish a fund and not establish what the fee would be. But it is, I don't think it's a fee, I think it's an exaction, and I think it's an illegal exaction. But, what do I know?
Look, I'm not going to speak to the exaction. I know I've paid it. That doesn't mean it's not illegal, by the way, but I certainly wasn't going to challenge it if it gave me my special permit. But I do know that, whether it's Carberry or some small guy in East Milton, Carberry
is going to be paying big bucks to study the traffic on Canton Avenue.
That will be a great study that we'll never do a thing with.
Well, it may be, but asking them to then contribute to money to study traffic in East Milton.
So Carberry might be a bad example then, because if Carberry's going to spend money, then, and there's something they can legitimately spend money on, then great. Go spend your money on the traffic circle. What if we have a project in East Milton that's a small development in East Milton, whether it's starting a Dunkin' Donuts, opening a bank, the Blue Hills Bank, it's clearly contributing to traffic in East Milton Square, but there's nothing they can do to mitigate their small impact. But they could if they were part of a larger plan over time.
Well,
So what if you had it be directed towards the area in which the site is more, not just all across town. Carberry, I think, is big enough that it would warrant whatever mitigation to actually be implemented, like they do in Boston. But something on a smaller site, as you're using East Milton Square, I could think of Milton Village, because there's so many small sites that the one project is probably not going to warrant a large mitigation, but they might warrant a contribution to something. Is it something like there where we've talked with MAPC about having a way to have a fund in which those funds can be used for improvements in Milton Village, not just for traffic, but let's say sidewalk or infrastructure, other kinds of
So maybe this needs to be
lighting or
maybe this
what
needs
have
to
you.
be neighborhood specific, and maybe we use Milton Village as the first one because we're doing a study there. But I'm trying to establish a first step, because I think this is a cart before the horse, or a chicken and egg issue. I don't know how the planning board requires any sort of funding to a study in a special permit when there is no study and there is no bank account into which to deposit money, other than to putting it into the general fund, which is gone 11 months later.
I mean, the reason I think it's worth continuing to discuss and investigate is because every single project, the biggest concern people have is about traffic. And quality of life issues that people talk about in Milton, and you use East Milton as an example. We've heard it in Milton Village too, and I'm sure you'll hear it from a lot of other places. The traffic is the biggest issue. So having something which would help address traffic, I think people in general in town would be supportive of. The question is the legality, I guess. We'd have to ask John Flynn.
Yeah,
town
well, I haven't been
council,
able to get John
and-
Flynn to focus on it.
Yeah,
So maybe if it's actually submitted as a potential warrant article, he'd pay attention to it. I don't know. But what I do know is it's a problem, and everyone in town talks about it all the time.
But all these projects do traffic studies. It's simply that Falcone.
And the traffic study's always going to say that it doesn't have a huge
Well,
impact.
no, Falcone, what we should do is the study should address specific measures to be taken in East Milton to improve the traffic in the neighborhoods, not just say this is the level of traffic, but specific measures to say, make this road one way,
So-
blah, blah,
My
blah.
concern with that, I agree with you. That is what we need, is that level of study. My concern is that in East Milton Square or in Milton Village, I don't believe any specific project, putting Falcone aside because of its density, I don't believe that most projects in East Milton or Milton Village are going to be able to fund anything related to changing any sort of traffic problem that's going to have an impact. You're going to have to aggregate 5 or 6 projects over time to be able to fund implementing any of the recommendations within that study.
So may I use an example? Just in where my office is in Fort Point Channel, they did a planning exercise called the 100-acre plan. And within that plan, they have a fund established in which some developments have to pay into the fund, and that fund's going to be used to pay for road improvements and parks, green spaces. And so, but they don't have enough money in that fund. And DPDA would be the ones who would have information about that. Until they get enough money, they just hold that money until they have enough to do some of the improvements. I'm absolutely certain it's there.
Same thing Newton did. They don't collect the money, but they have an absolute commitment
No,
to get the money once they have enough.
They collect the money in Boston
I understand
at
it,
the
but it's
time of permitting.
Right, which is the way Newton should have done it.
Falcone has actually made an offer to pay for the light on Bassett Street, and
Falcone's different because it's a huge project.
but they are looking at it. They know that they want to,
But
they're going to contribute to the area to which they're impacted.
Think about Milton Village and what we're trying to do there with some of those smaller sites. Any one of those projects, if it's a 12-unit project, is not going to warrant putting in the cost of a new signal. You won't get a new project out of it.
Right.
But 2 or 3
could
of
get
those
a
sites
quarter of it,
together
right.
might
You get
get
it.
you a new traffic light, right?
I agree.
Or a
So
crosswalk.
that's, I think, what Brian's trying to get at.
Is this BPDA plan, the 100-year plan, the
100-acre
fund
plan.
that's created, is it a revolving fund? Did you just identify the fund that we've been looking for?
I just don't know if Boston's different than
Boston,
municipalities.
you can't model it on Boston. Boston is sui generis.
But it operates the way you're talking about. It absolutely operates the way you're talking about.
What would the assessment be? How much?
I don't,
It's based on the project's scale and scope in Boston.
Well, I understand,
have to
but
be-
it
it would have
has
to
to
be
be
done here
part
as
of the
well.
deal. In other words, the town meeting has to determine what this,
Could be a
town meeting would- well-
percentage of the permit.
you could do whatever percentage.
what
like
sort of
that.
percentage?
Why does the town meeting have to determine it? In no other municipality that I've ever been
This is
part
not
of, the
a
planning board
fee.
determines
This is
it.
not a fee.
It's a
This is
special
something
permit
else.
requirement.
This is what
special permit
yeah,
requirement.
I mean, like Boston again, I'm going to use that one for example because I know
To
it.
answer,
The planning board, a board of 5 elected people by the people in this town, look at the traffic study that the project submits and figures out what its impact is going to be, and it calculates an impact into
What if
which,
it has no impact?
then you don't have to contribute. This isn't a pay to play.
In other words, we determined this is a
it's a
5.
pay to
This
play,
is
you have to contribute
on a scale of
$2,000
10. This is a 5. Therefore, you have to. You're saying 6%. Is that what you're
say
suggesting?
any percent.
No, I mean,
You have to pay 3%.
or the planning board just says, we want $10,000
No,
to put into
that's-
this
no,
fund.
No,
You need to have a,
there needs to
Need
be
to have a level playing field.
standard. There has to. People have to know what they're getting
Okay,
into.
so what
Not
you,
to create a revolving fund, in in my
Of course you
opinion.
do.
So one way you could do it is you could say, if the level of impact identified in the traffic analysis is changing the level of service to a certain jump, that triggers you to have to make X percentage of contribution. We'd have to come up with the percentages. We don't think we have to do that tonight. But that could be your trigger point. Like, I read the traffic studies related to the 88 Wharf project, that the intersection of Wharf Street and Adams Street was F before 88 Wharf was permitted. And part of the recommendation in the traffic analysis was to put a traffic signal at the intersection of Adams, Canton Ave, and Randolph Ave. It wasn't done. It should have been, if that was part of the recommendations, that actually should have been a mitigation measure by most people's standards. And what I do, if it's identified in that report, the municipality would require it to be done. Bill says there were reasons it wasn't done. But if that were done, let's just say as an example, this project, a project was being looked at, and that intersection was identified as a B, and it was going to go to a C, or D to an F, then there would have to be a contribution, because that project's triggering that intersection's level of service to get worse.
All I know is we're the planning board. We've got 3 before us right now. Zoning and map amendment fixes a problem. Temporary signs fixes a problem. ISO zoning amendment fixes a problem. None of them plan. I'm trying to put some planning together so that we can start trying to fix some of the real problems in this town.
You're trying to raise some money, and the question is...
No, Alex, I'm not trying to raise some money. I'm trying to raise money to
pay
fix
for
problems.
traffic studies.
Why else are we here? If we're not going to fix anything with these projects that we're permitting all the time, why are we permitting them? If we're going to continue to do things in town that are going to increase our traffic, and then we're going to have people say, well, why is there traffic? Well, there's going to be traffic unless we have money to fix it, and we don't have any money in this town. And if we're not going to have money, it's
You're
not
going to make it just hard for developers to develop.
Please,
Well,
the
no.
developers are going to contribute to this all the time. They do in every community.
They don't do it in any community because they don't have these things. I mean, you say they do, but they don't.
Alex, I pay them all the
No,
time.
you're talking about in Newton, one street putting wires underground.
And I've given you an example in Framingham. I can
What's
give you
the example in Framingham?
I just gave it to you. Framingham has a fund that you can contribute to for Route 9 development, because if you can't mitigate, they'll take money from you to fund traffic improvements along the way. It's an idea.
Well, I would like to see that zoning. I mean, I've asked for this zoning beginning last October. I said, let's see what other towns
So let's
do.
see if...
I mean, we're trying to reinvent the, or invent the wheel,
Good, let's
not
invent a
reinvent
wheel.
the
Let's
wheel.
invent a wheel then. Let's do it. Let's
Well,
invent a
okay,
wheel.
but it's late, and I'm not sure we can do it in the next 2 hours.
Does it come out of the zoning, or does it come
It's just a special permit requirement.
comment, it's something in there? Is it from the planning board, or is it
My
from,
Framingham attorney did not call me back today.
is it the planning board, or is it redevelopment?
There has to be a requirement that the planning board will impose this on everyone, and it has to be in the zoning.
Do we require a traffic study of everyone? Or do we make a judgment about that?
No, we don't.
So why wouldn't we be able to make a judgment about this if we make a judgment about traffic studies?
Because it has nothing to do with the project.
It does, because it only would be triggered if there was determined by the traffic study that there was an impact that was going to have a greater cost than one
But just
project.
think, you've got to do the traffic study before you know if there's going to be an assessment.
Right, yeah, you would.
You would.
So people wanting the developer are going to have to do a traffic study to determine how their development will impact before they've even designed the development.
But the whole point of the traffic study is to tell you whether you need to mitigate it. And if it's a big enough project, the planning board's going to require mitigation, like you mentioned at Carberry, right?
You know, if you've got to mitigate, then you're going to spend the money in the area. You're already going to spend the money, but you're still going to have to contribute to this fund.
No, you're not necessarily going,
Can't
This
make
fund
it
is in
an
lieu of...
either or.
You have to.
You can't. to have
fund
a
is intended to
standard.
be in lieu of, if your project isn't large enough to warrant a reasonable traffic mitigation, installing a traffic light, installing a crosswalk, changing streets to one way or the other, then you can contribute to a fund.
I
So
thought
that
that-
aggregating your projects over time get you the light that's needed.
I just,
Bill-
you know, if we
clearly
had,
you don't like it, I get it.
if another town somewhere in Massachusetts had this program, I'd like to see it.
So, Bill, what we talked about as in Milton Village, where we can make part of the zoning a contribution to a fund, which would be to improve the area, right?
Yes.
So how is this any different than that?
Well, who gave you
let's
this?
tag
Who gave you
Josh.
this advice that this is the law, Bill?
MAPC.
MAPC.
Oh.
So can we ask
Josh.
Josh? And in the meantime, I would be supportive of at least having this as a placeholder, and if we need to pull it, then, because we don't have adequate time between now and then, we've done that plenty of other times in terms of pulling.
But I need John Flynn and planning staff to work on this because I don't have time to run around and gather all this information together.
I mean, if we have to make the decision tonight, I would say, I would support
his
having it as a
office would-
placeholder. If we can get a hold of Josh or whomever else at MAPC to give us an answer about, would this fall into the same category as what they've suggested we could do?
Well, no, we might ask Josh to give us his, the background of his legal advice
On that?
on that, just because
It was,
I have a question about that. I'd be interested to see what he...
the context was that if you would give a bonus, just like in the Central Ave, where there was, if you would grant a bonus for, and as a part of that bonus, you would make the contribution, whether, I'm not sure what's the fund or whether it's you would pay for specific improvements. But that was the context in which we talked about it, because we said, well, how can we incentivize certain kinds, like historic preservation, or how, other ways could we help fund improvements to Milton Landing by having a fund, which could be even nonprofits could do fundraising like a Friends of, and be able to pool all of that money together to go into improvements in Milton Village and Milton Landing. And he
This
said that
sounds
we
like a
could.
question that you're asking.
No, this is what I asked MAPC, and
Right,
he said,
and he
yes,
said,
we
oh,
could."
sure, you can do anything you want to.
No, he said it's been done. Where, I don't have that answer on top of my head, but we'll have to get his legal, he's not an attorney, he'll have to provide us with whatever other precedent has been there, but they would be the ones who would have knowledge of where some of this stuff is being done, that's for sure.
Well, I have no problem putting this on as a placeholder, even though I caution that I don't think that it is legal. And probably, when the time comes, won't vote to recommend the article. But I'm happy enough to put it on the warrant.
Okay. So with that, are you ready for a motion that
Yeah.
we'll do?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you like that motion to read?
I just say we'll submit these things to the selectmen.
Okay,
To select the 4 zoning articles to the selectmen for inclusion on the warrant.
as amended tonight for at least the temporary signs?
Well, yeah,
Or
I
do we
mean, the
know?
separate, Lauren has the,
Okay.
as we've discussed.
As we've discussed, okay.
And the revolving fund is, we'll just leave the way it is, because there's no way we're going to work this out tonight.
Okay, so moved.
Article 50 would be changing 17 to 18, and being,
Yeah, the date.
changing the date from 17 to 18 and being submitted by the planning board.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay. As amended and discussed tonight. Did you get that motion? All right.
Unless we had,
Look,
I'm just waiting.
well,
I
this
think
is
there was a reason we had it submitted by the Board of Selectmen, actually, the first time around.
because they're supposed to.
it's a fund.
But we can
Being
submit it.
handled by
We can
the
submit
town
it. We
administrator?
can submit it and change it later, if we need to.
I don't think we can
Second.
decide, I don't think we can decide to submit something for someone else, so I would say it has to be.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? No further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that concludes
A motion
our
to
agenda.
adjourn?
But maybe we want to hear the town planner's report.
Okay,
No?
then I'll hold off on my motion.
All right. So, and Lauren, we're going to hold your report. I'm sorry, but it's 9:14 and it's,
Oh, all right, so motion to adjourn.
all right. We have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.